A suitcase containing a chilling journal entry, a barnacle-covered head of a porcelain doll, and the decaying grand staircase rail, a haunting reminder of lives lost. These are more disturbing objects recovered from the Titanic wreck. One of the eeriest items ever recovered from the Titanic wreck is the barnacle-crusted head of a porcelain doll. This doll belonged to Eva Hart, a young girl who survived the sinking but had to leave her doll behind in the rush to the lifeboats. Eva lived into the 90s and would often speak about the doll when telling her story, but what no one expected was that 65 years after the disaster, the doll's head would actually be found. It turned up in the 70s, 2,000 meters underwater, halfway between Southampton and New York, during a salvage operation led by Captain Abel Federico Nogueras. The head, which was cracked, bald, and covered in sea growth, was later confirmed to match a 1906 mold used by the original German manufacturer. Its body was never recovered, but today the head looks pretty grotesque. As you can see, lifeless eyes, the faded paint, the stains, there are barnacles all over it, which isn't pretty. Eva herself never saw it again before her death in 1996, but she was glad to know it had been found. Honestly, if she did see the doll head, she'd probably cry. Recovered in the early 2000s, this leather suitcase spent nearly a century at the bottom of the North Atlantic. Remarkably, the outer shell held together, keeping the contents inside mostly intact. Gloves, a pair of spectacles, a comb, and a small journal were found inside. Obviously, the journal drew immediate attention. Most of the ink had faded, but infrared imaging revealed some scattered entries, and one stood out. A short passage describing a dream about drowning in cold darkness. Not only is this creepy as is, but it was also dated just days before the Titanic actually sank. The identity of the writer was never confirmed, and the entry didn't mention any names. Now, could this have been a coincidence? Sure. I mean, I think, the possibility of drowning is probably on a lot of people's minds when they hop on a boat, but that doesn't make the journal entry any less somber or unsettling, and it stuck with the crew who recovered it. Not just because of any supernatural stuff, but because it just felt unfinished, like someone's thoughts have been paused and then just left there waiting. I mean, that is kind of exactly what happened. The Titanic's grand staircase is one of its most iconic images, elegant, ornate. At the time, it represented everything the Titanic claimed to be, new, extravagant, advanced, but it did not survive. It was most likely crushed as the ship split apart and sank, but during expeditions in the 80s, divers found what they believed were fragments of it in the forward debris field. One piece in particular, a section of handrail, was buried in sediment and warped. The wood had cracked along the grain, it was waterlogged and stripped of its finish. There was really nothing grand about it now, just this splintered piece of railing, but that's what got some of the divers. This was something hundreds of people had leaned on, walked past, maybe even desperately held on to during their final moments. So seeing it sitting down there in the dark where it fell, it hit harder than anyone expected. One diver later said it felt like finding a piece of a memory, not just wood. Inside a steward's footlocker was a clump of belongings, mostly ruined by pressure and seawater, but among them a few sheets of music survived. One in particular caught everyone's eye. Of course, there was a lot of damage, but there was a title at the top, "Nearer, My God to Thee." It's the hymn reported to have been played as the ship was going down. Whether that's true or just part of the lore, finding the actual sheet music changed the way people talked about the story. The ink had bled in places, leading some to call it the page that cried. Others noticed faint fingerprints along the edge, possibly from whoever packed it. Divers found a bunch of tools in the wreck's engineering section, surrounded by crumpled steel and collapsed walls. Just tools at first glance: coal shovels, wrenches, heavy-duty tongs. A few had warped or melted, some were fused to nearby piping. One wrench still had a torn piece of glove jammed into its handle. These weren't dropped, they were in use. Everything about how they were found pointed to people working during the disaster, not running. Some tools were mid-task, left exactly where they'd been used, holding on, doing their jobs as long as they could. There's nothing flashy about any of this. It's just iron and grime. I mean, most of it's unrecognizable. It's the kind of gear that you'd walk past in a museum without really thinking much about it, but to the divers and crew who pulled them up, these tools were almost more important than jewelry or silver. They belonged to the people who had the worst job on the ship, trapped below deck, still trying to keep the ship from going down. A small Bible was found inside a cloth bundle tucked into a coat's inner pocket. Small, leather-bound, warped from water, but still mostly intact. The pages had swelled from the moisture, but one section was still readable. Psalm 69. A pencil underlined beneath one line, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck." No one knows when it was marked. Could have been before the voyage, could have been during, could have been as the ship was going down. The pencil mark was faint, but it was definitely there. The cloth wrapping probably helped keep the Bible together. Most paper items that deep didn't stand a chance, of course. This one somehow did, and it wasn't ornate or expensive. The cover was plain, no inscription, just something someone brought with them because it mattered to them. This came out of a small handbag recovered from the debris field, a compact mirror, cracked straight through the center, the kind of thing you'd expect to find in any woman's purse in 1912. Basic, silver-colored case, no engraving. It wasn't valuable, but something about the mirror caught attention right away. Before it was even brought up, a diver noticed how the broken glass reflected strangely in the submersible lights. The cracks made these shapes that almost looked like eyes. At least that's how they felt at the time. Another diver joked that it blinked. Now obviously it didn't. It was just fractured glass reacting to the light, but after that, people started calling it the mirror that blinked. Not seriously, just as a nickname of course, but still, when it went on display later, some museum visitors said they felt weird standing near it. Something about it just made people uncomfortable. And that's the thing with objects like this. It's not just about what they're worth or what they were used for, it's about where they were found. A private item meant for quiet, everyday moments, but pulled out of one of the most infamous shipwrecks in history. In 2012, a small metal case was recovered from the wreck, wedged under some debris. Inside was a sealed glass vial filled with thick black liquid. Nobody could say for sure what it was. It wasn't labeled, and it didn't match anything on passenger inventories or supply logs. Some guessed it was ink, maybe used in printing or for ship records. Others weren't so sure. A few reports claimed the liquid behaved strangely when light hit it, forming these faint swirling patterns that looked almost like symbols or writing. Could have been coincidence, could have been some chemical reaction from decades underwater, but it was weird enough that people kept talking about it. The vial was never put on public display. Some say it was just quietly studied, then shelved, but the truth is that no one really knows. There wasn't much follow-up, and official records didn't get into detail. Still, it became one of those Titanic artifacts that people keep asking about, mostly because of those gaps. There's no confirmed use or clear origin, and no solid explanation for how it stayed sealed. Now, I'll admit, I have a hunch it's probably nothing big, but it's just odd enough that people aren't quite ready to let it go. This one's been debated ever since it surfaced. A scrap of paper supposedly found during a dive near the stern section. It was inside a waterproof pouch, the kind meant to keep documents dry in emergencies. The paper was torn, badly damaged, but a few words were still readable. Boilers gone, lights flicker, this may be it. Forgive me. That's all. There was no name or date. The ink had run in places, and the handwriting didn't match any known crew records. Some researchers actually thought that maybe it was a fake planted there, maybe. The note read like someone writing fast, though, under pressure, not expecting to finish the sentence. There's no hard proof either way. If it's authentic, it would be the only written message recovered from the night of the sinking, written during it, not before. If it's not, it's still one of the more compelling rumors to come out of the wreck. And finally, we have a set of small hair combs found in a pouch recovered from the third class section. Just basic grooming tools wrapped in fabric and packed neatly. There's nothing rare or out of the ordinary about these combs, but finding them like that, clean, arranged, and preserved, it just hit a little differently. They weren't luxury items. They weren't meant to impress anyone. They were just part of someone's normal day. Probably an immigrant heading to America to start over. Most recovered artifacts fall into two categories on the Titanic: big, expensive pieces or things too damaged to recognize. And these didn't fall into either. They were just normal. And that's what made it hard to forget. Not because of what they were, but because of what they said without meaning to. And that, as I've said many times before on these Titanic videos, these were real, everyday people. Some were quite wealthy, of course, but in essence, they were just people with hopes and dreams of a new life across the ocean. I've been your host, James, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.